today for myself and Dr.
Correct.
And I'm firing pretty good today.
Do you want to ask them questions?
Well, I need to explain one thing. I don't know if you knew the doctor used to be a welterweight in the service. So that's where the black guys came from. Yesterday we thought we'd spar a little, but I got the worst under. But no, I made a visit to two lights, and I decided to go out on the rocks and have my wife had me take a couple of pictures. Well, I had shoes on, and of course I struggle a little bit with my coordination, because it goes too much, and I slipped a little bit, and there's the end result, so there we are. But
Do you need to ask them any questions? Yes. You need to ask Jeff the mechanism of injury for the first contact. No, but what I'm getting at, what he shared, what Ray shared, is that when you're playing football or boxing, the strength of your neck is so important, right? So that's why we do a lot of strengthening, because you're used to taking hits this way. But he talked about uppercut to the back of the head. And then I think he just covered up. So as physicians, you didn't see any change. You didn't see Ray as a middleweight drop his gloves. Your job as a ringside physician, if you ever choose to do that, your job as a ringside physician, the minute a fighter gets dinged, a ding is a mild TBI. So the minute a fighter gets dinged and drops his hands, he or she, I mean, a lot of good female fighters, drop their hands, then they're vulnerable. So then, as a ringside physician, stop the fight. Okay? And then the job of the ringside physician, when they witness a mild TBI, you notice that Ray said, never been knocked down. Never mind, he knocked out, never been knocked down. So your job, when you see a mild TBI or a concussion, your job is call the fight off, then you document no contact 30 days. The USA Amateur Boxing Federation has regs, because we don't trust boxers. We don't trust boxers, and you don't trust football players, and you don't trust, we're the soldiers back here. You don't trust soldiers. They want to go back into the fight. So you're not asking Ray to climb up the stairs. Do you have a headache, Ray? No, doc. I want to go back. You don't ask soldiers, do you have a headache there, soldier? G.I. Joe? No, doc. I want to go back in. As a ringside physician, you get dinged. Ding. I'm not talking about knocked down. Ding. No contact 30 days. You get knocked down, but you get back up. Amateurs, no contact, 90 days, right? So it's very clear, as opposed to you all are going to go out and do sports medicine, and people are going to be saying, and what Ray described very well is the post-concussion syndrome. Did you have that yet? No. But when Ray talks about, he's the fighter, you're the doctor. So with language, he's reading the textbook to you. He's telling you, oh, he might go walk into me and say, Doc, I had post-concussion syndrome. Okay, Ray, check, check. You got headache, fatigue, neck pain, etc., chronic fatigue, and the sleep disturbance. Right? So he described what your professors would describe when they talk about, we used to call it post-concussion syndrome. That syndrome. He also talked about changes from today in 1928 when we talked about dementia pugilistica. Today we talk about chronic traumatic encephalopathy. when I heard Ray speak at the New Hampshire Brain Injury Association, yesterday I talked about dimmer switch, knocked out, lights out, and I talked about dimmer switch. When he was at the podium and he said, I remember my second impact, the light just went beyond 10 for me. Because what you will probably hear, the same thing I heard when I was studying to be a ringside physician, second impact syndrome, when we talk about soccer or football or hockey or being a pub, second impact, when we study it, it's a huge cascade and cerebral swelling, and then only way out for Raymond Magnet, right? But Ray talked about the second impact syndrome, a small ripple. So what you also know from your studies, what we talked about yesterday, Ray's talking about chronic traumatic encephalopathy. He had a small ripple. He also said he got back in the ring within a week because nobody saw what happened. He got hit in the back of the head, not the front, where he could keep his head down. He got hit in the back of the head. He knew something was wrong. Muscle memory. You all talk about tissue memory and OMM, but now he's talking muscle memory. So he got hit and he's protecting himself. So the doctor didn't see it. Ray denied it, being a tough kid, and he didn't admit it. And then the other part that he talked, a couple of things that he talked about, sleep. Treat the sleep. You got to treat the sleep. Don't over-medicate, don't medicate. Treat the sleep. Do a good sleep history when you talk to athletes. The other part about athletics, where any National Guardmen in here? Maine National Guard does the impact and the ANAM before they deploy. The rest of the military does, 100% of the military does the ANAM. You follow what I'm, what's that?
I don't know what that is.
You know what the impact is?
No.
You have a hand up?
No. I don't know what it
Are you
is.
sure you have your hand up? So before you deploy, DOD, Department of Defense regulation, everybody does it, ANAM, automated neuropsychological assessment metric. So it studies speed, some recall. It's a screen. It's a screen. When everybody who plays contact sports in the state of Maine does the impact, not combative sports, not just combative sports, contact sports, girls and boys, men and women. So it's a screen. So if you have somebody who gets dinged or knocked out or knocked down, then they repeat that. That's a screen. Okay? Impact, ANAM, those are screens on the computer. Reaction time, recall. Very important for y'all. Right? Neurologist, physiatrist. Where's the physiatrist? In the back of the room, right?
Oh, they actually have a club meeting today, so
Oh, I thought this young lady was a physiatrist. No? But because when you're talking about neuropsychological testing, and don't forget, I mean, we have a PhD program in psychology here at UNE. So try to understand how and when to use your neuropsychologist. That's a very lengthy procedure for change of behavior, etc. But Ray also talked about something that I heard. Somebody saw Ray presenting with chronic traumatic encephalopathy and early Parkinson's. And somebody saw major depressive disorder. So that's why it's so important to really make that diagnosis, make the correct diagnosis.
Those an opportunity to come to a more accurate diagnosis that they have.
A more accurate diagnosis, how? Thorough history and physical examination, right? So I'm not saying, oh, he needed a SPECT or a PET or an functional MRI. I'm saying he needed a more thorough history and physical examination. Somebody had a hand up.
I just had a question. First off, thank you so much for sharing your story.
are so welcome. This is what I do,
So I
very
think,
dedicated at it.
so I think the hardest part, one of the hardest part is educating young adults about the impact of this, because now, because we don't see the long-term effects, they more live in the present and think they're invincible. So I'm wondering, as student physicians, how, do you have recommendations on what is the effective, most effective way to, in educating young adults on what to do or what to be aware of?
Okay, well, education is always the key to everything. You know, if you don't know about it, where are you going? But it's a very, with adolescents, my concern is really the second impact syndrome, because at that age, the brain is still developing, and, yeah, that's very important. As far as educating them, that's still going to be a little tough thing, because I think the adults and the coaches need the education, and it comes from there. I believe that at that age, they need to limit hitting to 1 day a week and teach proper, better ways of tackling. And they have to do a better, I mean, most coaches, their heart's in the right place, but I don't think they do enough screening for that higher level to supervise. And I think if the children are supervised right and they're told, when I speak to, I always speak on the level of the group that I'm addressing. When I address the 8 through 10-year-olds, I'm down on one knee at their level, and I keep it to 10 minutes. I don't tell them any of the long-term. We talk about honesty and you know, being the best they can be, and being honest about their symptoms. That's what's very important at that time. But yeah, education's the key. To get through to them, I guess you have to be resilient and never give up, because you're going to be challenged. And in the field you're in, you're going to try to be the best you can be too. You're going to be challenged. You're going to be challenged by coaches. You're going to be challenged by players. They're going to try to deceive you, not anything personal. It's just that nature of the beast. And you have to stay firm and be the best you can be. So it's, I hope I addressed that. That was a tough question. Did I get that right?
Rand, I think
Yes.
Just to kind of piggyback on that question, are you aware if any of this concussion education, second impact syndrome education is being mandated in youth sports, high school sports, or college sports? I remember when I was in the NCAA, it was required that we took a performance enhancing drugs course before our season started. We had to do it every year, and it had to be checked off the list, but we didn't get any concussion education. And you know, I was playing contact sport at the time, so I think that in hindsight that would have, you know, definitely been important, because I definitely recall situations where, you know, I would play through very similar circumstances.
Well, the education has come a long way now, and you know, they're really getting after it, but it's never going to be up to what I believe it should be. When at first a lot of schools ran for me because they didn't, this quote used to kill me, we don't want to inflate the situation and scare the athletes. My response was we teach any students not to text and drive. We teach them not to take drugs because it can be very harmful to them. Well, I'll tell you what, you challenge a concussion, that's very dangerous also. So getting the facts out there. You know, if you can argue with my goal is honesty, you know, there's a little problem there, but it's gotten a lot better. Of course, yeah, I bumped into the same thing. That's why I formed the second impact. But I see it. They're doing a real good job now. I mean, they're really getting on top of it. So hopefully we do even more. Concussion's the key.
If you go to USABIA.org, USA Brain Injury Association, what's happening, I was on the board of directors for the Maryland Brain Injury Association. So what's happening in the schools the part about the impact is being mandatory in most high schools. And it wasn't really the coaches, it was mom and dad, because they wanted their kid, I mean, you can do it in the ring. You can take a fighter out for 30 days, but if you take a football player out for 30 days, then mom and dad are worried about them getting their scholarship.
That's 4 games.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's big,
So,
it's huge.
so
Yeah.
a good website is usaeia.org, and then you can go look at the state, whether it's Maryland or New York. But the impact, the mandatory impact, came out of Washington State. And that's why it's so important for y'all to be involved with the New England states in community outreach. And Dr. Bilski is on the board of directors for, I forget the young man who had a brain injury and developed seizure disorders and passed away.
Mike Goulet.
Goulet?
Goulet.
The Goulet Foundation.
Yeah.
So that's something you all want to get involved in. In Maine has a BIA as well, so as New Hampshire does in the other states. That's how we met.
No, I was just gonna address the original question. I think I hope you've given us some tools to address the issue of short-term gains versus long-term gains. And I appreciate an athlete who has a once-a-week game at the football player, so 30 days is an issue. But if there is just a way of taking the long-term gains, and you expressed it so beautifully, is I've ruined my entire career and my life for one game, for a short-term game. And I think maybe as practicing new physicians, I know, teenagers are invincible and you can't tell them otherwise, but maybe start talking in those long-term aspects may give them some aspirations for being a little more careful. So thank you for that.
Very welcome, thank you. I'm the end result. You know, if you let these concussions, if you let them heal, you should be good to go. You should have entirely healed. You do what I did. We're playing Russian roulette. Had a good bet.
Would you describe your headaches?
Headaches they've been constant.
Okay, so here's your head.
Oh, okay, frontal, and I would call them moderate, but always there. Always there. And sometimes if I really exert myself, with the blood flow, they will get a little bit more intense, but not like they used to. And, medication really, it's not the answer, it's just, I believe the roots up there are kind of black.
And have you gotten treated by, so you're in an osteopathic school, and I'd love to have you lay down on a treatment table, and I'd like to evaluate your SEMs, your scalenes, and suboccipital.
Game for anything. Any way I can help. I told Dr. Cantu over at Boston University, because I donated my brain to them when I go. But I warned him, I said, Doc, you're going to need 2 jackhammers to get in there. Anything that I can do to help after here, that's what it's all about. Yes, did I answer that?
Yeah, you're going over there.
Oh.
Dr. Thieme is professor in manual medicine, and the lab is right over
You
there.
gonna hook me up too?
No.
Oh, that's all right.
So both you and Dr. Bograkos mentioned the importance of getting a good history, a concussion history.
Yes.
I guess my question is 2 parts. Is when do you remember someone actually taking a concussion history? And if they took it, when did you finally decide that you were going to fess up that you had concussions? Did anyone ever ask you when you denied it? Or did nobody ever ask?
They really didn't understand it back in the 60s.
Because he was a fighter.
Yeah, and it just, nobody knew about long-term. They were all looking for like a bleeding hematoma or seizures. And that's where the EEG came. Outside of that, but somebody would have, Carmen Basilio would have sat down with me and said, Ray, long-term over here? Oh, I'm going to put those brakes on. But I knew I could battle those headaches. And it just wasn't a deterrent. And that's what drives me today. But that history because concussions are all different, we handle them differently. They're like snowflakes. You're not gonna find two snowflakes alike. The same with concussion. Nobody handles those concussions the same. Now, there's a theory that we have in boxing, and this question is the most popular question that ever comes up. How many concussions are too many? Well, you know, you hear 3 today. Let me tell you what our theory is in boxing. We call it the glass jaw theory. Okay? Now, let's take, for example, an up-and-coming fighter that's he's a real tough kid. He's never been knocked out. He's really rolling. All of a sudden, he bumps into a tough fight. Maybe he either gets stopped, knocked out, or takes a severe beating. Well, they call it, it seems like he's never really the same after that. Maybe 2 fights later, he gets stopped again. Or 5 fights later, he gets another stoppage. Well, we then give him the label as a glass jaw. You can't take it anymore. Well, really, in reality, that's what we should look for in regular sports. When we see an athlete that gets a concussion and then starts receiving them rather easily, it's time to get them out of there and find another sport. Okay, and I call that the glass jaw theory, same as in boxing. When a fighter starts to get nailed like that, he better find another sport. So to put a number on it is really tough because it's, it could be unfair to some. And it depends how close they are together, what the age is. And I hate to ramble, but I wanted to ask Dr. Jonas, the theory with second impact syndrome now, it has to be real, because we're finding out that the deaths occur in high school, okay, with the second impact. Why not in the NFL? Is it because those brains are more developed? So, that theory.
So I asked that question in 1994. I went to the NFL Sports Medicine Conference, right? 1994. So I had been a ringside position for a while. I asked that question from the audience, and it was like, Doc, can we talk to you during the break? Then, who did I talk to? I talked to the lawyers. The lawyers talked to me. But what the champ is talking about, he's describing second impact syndrome, a ripple of second impact syndrome, which we in the classroom hearing and understanding as chronic traumatic encephalopathy. When any physician, sports med, emergency med, when we initially read about second impact syndrome, again, the literature that I was given had to do with soccer, hockey, and boxing. Initially, when you read or even go to your textbooks and look at second impact syndrome, you're reading about that inflammatory cascade of the vascular permeability and an inflammatory cascade where you have acute edema and you have herniation. So now he's teaching herniation when it comes through when your brain gets swollen, acute, quickly, and no place to go. And then you shut down. You're all in the hindbrain system right now, right? So when you shut down, a second impact syndrome is for real, and what you get today is cutting edge information on second impact syndrome. You heard Ray talk about the ripple. You didn't hear Ray present such and such a soccer player from Sweden, or such and such a hockey player. And when Ray talked about Dr. Cantu, you need to read Dr. Cantu's literature, because he's the best in the nation for chronic traumatic when it comes to chronic traumatic encephalopathy. His background was more into football, though, being the Southern. And what else were you asking? I'm sorry.
Well,
too.
The other thing with the adolescents and the high school players, we've all read where sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 die each year. And everybody gets confused because they'll say, gee, that wasn't that bad a hit. Well, It's because either they received that hit at practice and didn't tell anybody, or they got that hit on an ATV or a skateboard at the playground. They didn't report it. It doesn't take even a hit to the chest next. It jars that head can cause, because it's gonna come easy. That second concussion, the brain swells, they have how many minutes?
And then the other point that Ray makes is that after a hit in football, you go back to your huddle, but when talking to Ray one-on-one, he had a hit, and then that's followed by another hit until ding, ding. The other part that you need to remember when you talk about head trauma, you have to go back to your mechanism of injury, and you have to think of force equals mass times acceleration, right? Holy cow, when you have 240-pound football players hitting each other, and they all do the 50 yards in what? They're fast. 4 seconds, right. That's a lot of acceleration and a lot of force. So they're repetitive, 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 repetitive. So that, this is another player in the chronic traumatic encephalopathy that you'll see during your neurology career. You'll see it. You'll see it. And then Ray also points out that just like, what we saw with Muhammad Ali. Initially I was not convinced, but the information that we're getting out of the Boston Brain Bank, many, many, many patients with chronic traumatic encephalopathy have pathology within the substantia nigra in the basal ganglia. It's just the way it works with your tau protein. But again, with the second impact, you need to be thinking of ripple, more ripple, huge ripple and herniation. Follow me with that? In the textbook is static, but here we have opportunity to talk and to have dialogue and to make that textbook dynamic.
Dr. Bograkos, actually, both Dr. Thieme. So when we're trying to screen, because if we're going to become physicians and some of us are going to do family medicine and primary care, it seems like there's a lot of different people involved in this, and maybe that's sometimes why things get mixed. You have too many lifeguards at the pool and the kid who's drowning gets mixed. So how does a doctor, when do I do a concussion history? When do I have that conversation with someone who's sports aged?
So every Friday, I'm consulting with psychiatric continuity services at Walter Reed, right? Every difficult cases, every patient gets asked. In the long psychiatric history, in social, we asked if they played ball. So what they do for fun, so you kind of ease into it. So when you're talking to people about what they do for fun and social, because you want to get a sense of their personality, then when you talk to them about contact, combat, sports, that's when you ask. And oh, by the way, I don't know how long I was knocked out. I'll tell you, when I played ball, there was one night game I went to the wrong huddle after my helmet got cracked. So that's what you call a clue. But it's really important when you talk to young people, especially if you're talking.
I actually did that. I lined up on the wrong side of the ball.
Yeah, we can talk about that later if we remember. But that's a really important question because you're talking about trauma.
Yeah.
So especially in primary care, you have time. But then, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you can explore that.
Well, just
In the ED, anything above the clavicle, you have to rule out cervical spine injury, plus what happened in here in the cranium.
Right, but part of that problem is the time, and also it's not. If someone comes into the ER, I'm not saying, hey, in the last 20 years have you had a concussion?
Not in the ER. No, but when you refer that patient to Dr. Thieme, she'll tell you.
I would say that because most of the people that I see are coming with some sort of pain as a history, if they have any sense of, you know, when I ask them about headaches, difficulty sleeping, I go back and I try to connect it up. And oftentimes, if I ask somebody, well, were you ever in a car accident? Oh yeah, I had a little whiplash, but nothing serious. So I just don't let them stop there because someone already told them in the emergency room it wasn't serious. So now it's my job to help them understand or to help them connect the dots as to how did you change after that? You know, did you have difficulty sleeping after that? Have you had difficulty with bruxism after that? Have you had a change in your vision after that? Have you had any ringing in your ears or dizziness at times after that? Because oftentimes it's just that they haven't put it all together. No one let them put it together. Right? So I just had a guy yesterday who was biking through Boston and was thrown off his bike. He was wearing his helmet. He didn't have a head impact, but he has a lot of problems that are concussion-like problems secondary to his injury. And so it's a great case. There's a lot of, I had a girl who was at like a big rally, at like a hockey match, and at halftime or whatever you call it for hockey, they were shooting out wet t-shirts, which I'd never heard of, into the audience. And she wasn't paying attention, and it whacked her on the side of the head. Now, she wasn't on a sports team, she wasn't in an accident. It had made a tremendous difference for the next couple of years of her life. She was a straight A student. She was on the swim team, she was on the tennis team. Her coaches wanted no part of the doctors saying, no, can't do it. Her parents wanted to take her to Florida on a trip. No, can't do it. You know, it puts you in a bad spot. But, like you're saying up there, like the long-term ramifications of her future as a good student in college are really dependent right now on the family and the school system allowing her to heal. So it can get complicated. It doesn't have to be that the football coach knows everything about concussions. You know?
You take that oath to help everybody with every bit of your heart. You have to stay firm because you're the end line right there. The buck starts with you. Without your consent, now they may pull you. Now go to another doctor, but let that be on their conscience, okay? If I had it my way, any youth that under the age of 14, I say play tackle football. It's great for you. It's great to learn. You get a concussion, I would err on the side of safety. Any concussion, 1 year off, you take a year off. Let that heal, and then everybody's safe. Hey, what are we doing here for a youth football game? We're going to risk this child's brain. But again, I get labeled that I'm anti-sports. No,
Yeah, but
I'm pro-sports.
for us, what we say is, when in doubt, take them out.
Yep, that's another version. Yep, when in doubt, we have to get together on it.
Thank you very much.
The college here.
Guys, hold on a second.
Dr. Bograkos and college. Well, I have a signed glove for the University of New England. And for the champions of education, I just want you to stay focused and keep punching. Thank you very much. Record days of my life was to meet this gentleman. I have so much respect for him. I want to give him a signed glove. Let's open my appreciation for all that he does. And I have one more thing for him here. Where'd you put it, honey?
It's in the bag.
Okay. Oh yeah. Here is a
I'm overweight.
bottle of wine called the Carmen Basilio. Picture here for the college. There's a
Okay, who wants to know? Who was the better fighter? Let's take a vote. Muhammad Ali, aka Cassius Clay, or Rocky Marciano? Let's take a vote. Nobody's done one. They haven't even heard of it.
Wait, Dr. Bograkos, I have to add one,
He was from New England, so.
That's right.
Ray, I have to add one thing. That wine is actually made in wine country in upstate New York.
Yes,
It's-
they bring down the road from the.
Yeah, Ventosa, one of the wineries.
Wow.
Thank you so much.